Hi, everyone. Welcome back to my channel, Courageous Communication. I just have some housekeeping things. I just want to remind you that my Facebook page was hacked about 2 weeks ago, and the associated pages, including Courageous Communication. So there are new pages for you to go like and follow. So please do that. Also, remember to subscribe to us on YouTube because that is a little less. Has a little less chance of being hacked. So we want you to subscribe there. That way you never miss an episode. Now that let's see, I think that's all the housekeeping stuff. So we're gonna go ahead and move on. I'm excited to welcome my guest, David Gilbreath. Um, David is actually a old high school. um, we went to high school together, and he is the father to Kasen, a child with Down syndrome. And since tomorrow is National Down Syndrome Day, I couldn't think of a better person to have on to tell us all about it. So I hope you will welcome David to the broadcast. Hey, David.
Hey, how are you?
I'm great. How's it going?
It's going great.
Good, good. So we are both battling a little bit of fun sun right now. So
Yeah,
just forgive us a bit, but
but I can.
I guess it's just that time, time change. So, David, I just want to kind of toss it over to you. I know you have a lot to share with us regarding Down syndrome, and tomorrow is a celebration of people with Down syndrome. So, kind of maybe just start there, or start with your story wherever you want to start, and I'm just going to jump in as I see fit to. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Go ahead.
Yeah, tomorrow's going to be a great day. So this is where we get to educate and celebrate all the accomplishments that kids and individuals with Down syndrome have done over the past year. So now we have business owners, we have athletes, we have family, friends. It's a big nationwide celebration. It's a really cool deal.
Yeah. And you kind of have some community in that. You were talking to me about, I believe it's DASCO.
Dasco, yes, the Down Syndrome Society of Central Oklahoma. So it's a great place here in Oklahoma to meet new parents with kids with Down syndrome, meet older parents with kids with Down syndrome, and just kind of get an idea of what the road looks like ahead. They do great stuff within the community. They put on, in fact, here April the 11th, they're putting on a fundraiser, a golf tournament fundraiser to raise proceeds that go into that funding to help individuals with Down syndrome
Okay.
create
And
these different
what
groups.
kind of help is that for? If it was that like medical bills, is that living
So
expenses?
yeah, it's all that. Plus um, they they do different groups. It's kind of like that. It's a wide variety of stuff that they have their hand on
Oh,
when
that's
it comes to
awesome.
individuals with Down syndrome. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of like the one stop shop there, right? Like you kind of
Yes,
get a whole
yes.
lot of
All the
services in
resources you
one
need,
place.
they're a great place to find and start with when you're looking for resources.
Great. Now, do they have, is that something that has sister type of organizations in other states, or is that just you would need to look
That's
in your
yeah.
specific
So
state?
so each state typically has something like that, or each city has something like that. There's always some kind of place, some sort of resource that you can look at, especially with any kind of kid with special needs. There's usually bigger cities have something like that.
Perfect. Perfect. All right. So I just want you to kind of tell us your story about, Kason coming into your life and what that looked like.
Yeah, so Kason was born in 2009. We did not have a prenatal diagnosis of Down syndrome. We didn't find out that he had Down syndrome until about an hour after his birth. He was rushed off to NICU because of breathing problems. His umbilical cord wrapped around his neck, and so they had to get him some breathing help
Yeah.
pretty soon. And so we didn't find out a diagnosis until about an hour later when the doctor came in and let us know.
Yeah. So
That
pretty
was
unexpected.
very unexpected. Yeah, yeah.
So what was the kind of reactions and responses to that? Because I'm sure that was there's some emotion involved in that.
Yeah, so at first it was heartbreak. We were both pretty devastated at the diagnosis, and I think that's just because we had a lack of knowledge, a lack of understanding of what we were getting into and what we were looking at,
Yeah.
which is where the resources come in.
Right. So when you talk about that lack of knowledge and lack of understanding, I'm sure that was kind of fear-based.
Definitely fear-based. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Negative. Yeah.
so
Negative, right? So I only knew about stigmas at that time, right? The inability to go to school, the inability to live on their own, the inability to hang out with peers and do everything that other kids can do at that age.
Mhm. Yeah, so all the negative things start
Yes,
to race in,
yes.
and then our thoughts control our feelings, and our feelings control our behaviors. And so how long was it, the process at which I think, I talked to you about this just a minute ago, but that um, grieving to acceptance process of like, this is where we're at, for you and for mom.
So his mother was a trooper. She, within a day, was ready to hit the ground running and, hey, this is where we're at. This is what we're going to do. Here's the process and the steps. It took me a couple of weeks to get in that right mindset. I was pretty down and out for a couple of weeks.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's kind of like we talked about. When you have a child, you have these expectations, right? And um, the one thing that I think everyone, either whatever spirituality is your thing, you're hoping for just health, right? I want 10
Yes,
fingers, 10 toes, two
yes.
eyes, all those types of things, right? And then whenever you get a different type of news, then maybe it feels like all those big hopes and dreams kind of like
Come
pop
crashing
in your
down.
face.
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, how did you kind of get the mindset back? What kind of helped you in that process?
So it took us talking with parents in our community that had kids with Down syndrome and getting to meet these kids and going to events where these kids were at and stuff like that. And so that helps more than anything, I think, is when you can find people within your community that have kids with Down syndrome and hanging out with them and getting to know them and getting to see the process through their day-to-day life. That really turns the coin when it comes to, okay, I can take a breath now. This is going to be okay.
Yeah.
Let's start looking at the next process.
Yeah. Yeah, when you see someone living that life and that it's doable, it's manageable, that it might even be really good, that then there comes some ease of transition, I'm sure, because I would, sometimes though that we're just resistant to meet new people,
Mhm.
resistant to
Yeah.
get into new groups and find out new things and learn different ways. Did you struggle with that at all? Just like a little bit of resistance to jumping in?
I did a little bit. His mother did not. She really pushed it, really got on the phone, really talked to people that we knew. We actually had a physician at the hospital that I worked at that had a older son with Down syndrome. And so she was a great resource right off the bat that we could run ideas and ask questions. And that's the thing too. People, you can ask anything you want to a parent with a kid with Down syndrome. I promise you they will answer any question you have. There's nothing too small, too simple, or too demanding of a question to ask a parent with a kid with Down syndrome. We're,
Do you find that is different than like a child that maybe is just your typical child?
I feel
And
like it is. It's kind of a tight knit community, and we're all willing to help and answer any questions or worries that you have.
yeah, that's really good. That's good that you know that about your community. And it sounds like maybe you're staying in this community, of course, because you
Yes.
still have your child at home, but also maybe to kind of give back. Is that what I'm kind of hearing?
Yeah, yeah. It's helping new parents who have a new diagnosis or have a younger kid with Down syndrome, so we can be that resource for somebody else.
Yeah. When you meet these people, do you see some of yourself in them like so
Yeah,
many years ago, though?
yeah. Scared, deer in the headlight, right? Like that's the big thing.
Yeah, for
Like,
sure. For
oh
sure.
man, what am I gonna do? It's gonna be okay. I promise.
Yeah. Wow. So we talked a little bit about the fact that you didn't have prenatal
Yeah,
diagnosis, and that you were telling me a lot that people with Down syndrome have a lot of medical issues, and that maybe
good.
that was kind of y'all's case early on. So tell us a little bit about the issues there.
So typically kids with Down syndrome develop or I guess every baby that's born has a hole in their heart, right? Between the two atriums. And
I don't know
so,
that, but you
oh,
do.
sorry. Yes. Sorry. Typically kids with Down syndrome don't close that up and they have to go in and have open heart surgery to close that up.
Wow.
We were lucky. And so what they typically do is they do an echocardiogram on the heart day one, and then they do one in 6 months, right, to follow the process of the healing, and then a year. And usually if it's not closed within that amount of time, they try to get them into surgery and get that closed. Luckily for Kasen, his was closed after 6 months, and we didn't have to deal with that part of things.
Okay.
But they
Is that a
also
pretty
have,
intense surgery? Like, I mean,
it's not as bad nowadays as it used to be. It's a pretty easy surgery for most surgeons nowadays.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds scary. That's why
Yeah.
I'm saying
Oh,
it.
yeah. Anytime. Yeah. We've had, and that is the thing. Any kind of surgery that you have with a kid with Down syndrome, there's always that possibility of things not going great. And we've had that scare in the past when he was 4 and he had tubes and his tonsils out. So his heart rate dropped, his blood pressure dropped, and they had to give him epinephrine to bring his heart rate back up and stuff like that. So for some reason, kids like that are very sensitive to anesthesia medications and stuff like that. And it's rough on them because they're just not quite, their immune system's not quite as good until they get older.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you had said that you were talking about 12 cases of something in 4 years. Tell me about that again.
So Kasen dealt with a lot of lung issues growing up, right? So because kids with Down syndrome typically have lower muscle strength, they have a hard time coughing up like phlegm and stuff like that most normal babies have. And so he developed I think we had 12 bouts of pneumonia between the age of 0 to 4 because
Wow.
of that. So it took him a while to develop those kind of muscles to get rid of that stuff.
Yeah. And is that something that is typical for every Down syndrome?
All kids, yeah. So muscle tone and muscle function is lower in kids with Down syndrome. That's not atypical, and so which is why a lot of the milestones that you see with the normal baby, say walking within 9 months and stuff like that, usually takes a lot longer for a kid with Down syndrome to accomplish. So Kasen, I believe, was almost 2 before he started walking.
Yeah. Wow. And you said about 4 to 5 years before
About 4 to
talking.
5 years before he was talking. Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm. Wow. Those are yeah, definitely prolonged milestones. So how do you, because we when we deal with parents, right, it's like, oh, well, so and so was doing this at this time, and I know this one was doing this. So how do you keep that comparison at bay? Because
So
that's hard,
that's
I'm
one of
sure.
the hardest things to do as a parent with a kid with Down syndrome. And we
Okay.
both, me and his mother, struggled with that quite a bit because it is, especially when you have peers who have kids that are about the same age, and you see the milestones that they're hitting and how quickly they're hitting those milestones. It gets depressing. It gets overwhelming at times. But you just have to understand that every kid is different. Every kid's going to have a different milestone timeline.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. That makes so much sense because I just think about, I always say like comparison is the thief of joy, right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
like when you're living in that and you're watching this kids in his same grade or his, neighborhood kids or so and so, and they're, moving through the milestones rather quickly, and you're waiting and you're waiting, and you're sewing into it, but for some reason you're waiting still. How, I mean, just kind of getting your mind right for that. So I'm sure that that's something some of the other parents prepared you for. Like, what were those conversations like when they're telling you, and because I'm sure you're going to them with this, that, we're concerned, are we behind schedule? What's going on? And how did they kind of encourage you and give you the feedback that you needed to be able to continue on?
Yeah, all of that. It was, is this normal? Is what we're going through right now normal? It
Mhm.
was always, yes, that's a normal process that you go through with a kid with Down syndrome.
Yeah.
There's a lot of resources online too that show a typical timeline for kids with Down syndrome
Hmm.
on talking, walking, all that fun stuff.
Yeah.
But we had some really good parents that that talked to us, especially Desiree. She was really good about getting online and talking to these different moms who had kids with Down syndrome and going over the process.
Yeah. Sounds like pretty proactive.
Yes.
She was not standing still. She was
He was
moving.
not. No, not at all.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Okay, so tell me a little bit about we're talking about just, you come home, you come home with the baby with a diagnosis you weren't expecting, you're not sure what to do, you're kind of a little bit in shambles and in fear. What at that point, how important was support system and your support network to you? And then how has that transitioned with you throughout his life? Because he's 12 years old now.
Yeah, it's man, it's such an integral part in raising a kid like that, because you have to have not only family and friends, but other people who have been through this before, so you can bounce ideas off of. I know for the first 6 months, he wasn't putting on weight like he should have, and so I had to wake up every night at 2 o'clock to make him eat, because he slept the whole night. So we did get lucky with that. So
Y'all were waking him
that's
up instead of him
a
waking y'all
humble
up.
brag, yeah, a little humble brag that we got to sleep the whole night. And so we would have to do stuff like that. And that's another thing that you ask other parents, like, hey, is this normal? Is this kind of typical for kids like this? And it's kind of typical.
Really? That's interesting. I've never heard that before. So that was
Yeah,
news
we
to
just,
me.
as far as having to wake him up and feed him, he just wasn't putting on the weight, wasn't, growing like he should. His growth rate was a little slower compared to most normal kids. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And so what does that support system look like now? If you had to kind of talk about your support system in the here and now, what does your support system look like now?
So now it's family, right? So it's family support group. It's kids that's parents are in the same special needs class as Kasen support group. But we're also part of Special Olympics here in Oklahoma, which is a huge support system for not just individuals with Down syndrome, but the special needs community. And so having stuff around like that has helped us tremendously. And we did move in 2018 to the Edmond, Oklahoma City area, because it does have more resources than where we were from originally.
Oh, okay. So were you from a more rural?
Yeah, more of a rural area, and now we're in Oklahoma City, so we've got better hospitals, better resources like the Down syndrome community, DASCO, Special Olympics. Everything is centralized here in Oklahoma City. So
Wow. And was that move specifically for?
Specifically for all of that.
Wow. That right there was mind-boggling to me, because a lot of times we're not thinking about, oh, let me move so for my kids, immediate need. We're thinking, oh, jobs, and because I need to be here and there, more adult-like needs. But
right.
So how big was that decision for you guys? And
it was a
were
pretty
you ready
easy
for it?
decision. I wish we would have made it sooner, but we made it. Let's see, 2018. All of his doctors were here. We were having to come to Special Olympics events here and stuff like that. And we knew about DASCO being here in the city of Oklahoma City. So that all played a big part into us making that move.
Yeah, very good. Okay, so we talked about support network, and then you talked about the fact that, inclusion is so important for everybody. Let's just say it's
Everybody.
important for
Yes,
everybody. It's not
everybody.
just important for
No.
one person or someone with Down syndrome or
Right.
someone with special needs or someone with learning differences. It's important for everyone. We all want to feel included. We want to feel like we have a place where we belong. So tell us a little bit about what are some positives with inclusion with Down syndrome, and maybe what are some of the things that still need some work? Where are some areas that still need some work?
So the great thing about including kids with Down syndrome or any kid with special needs right into the general education classrooms and stuff like that is now the kids that have brought up on a negative stigma towards kids with Down syndrome get to see for themselves that all these stigmas are not real, right? They're just like me. It's like one of those deals, right? You're around these kids enough, and not only does it help in the development of kids like Kasen, because when you're seeing your peers do certain things, you want to do that, right? You want to do everything that your peers want to do. but it's great for general education kids because they get to see and be around these kids, and they lose that stigma. They lose that seclusion. They don't want to seclude these kids as much. And they're like, hey, well, yeah, can Kasen come play with us? Or, hey, can Kasen come sit at my table and read with us?
Mm-hmm. Well, absolutely. And I feel like as a society, although it's been very slow, we have to admit that that's been slow. We are starting to see more people be hired with learning differences, special needs, different things, and they're in our workforce now in lots of different capacities.
Yes.
Not just, this is going to sound really backwards, but I'm just going to say it because really the only person that I ever saw growing up that was really like a special needs maybe person that was that had a job was like at Walmart as the greeter. That literally that's the only place I can think of where that I saw that. And maybe that's because I was from maybe a rural area, maybe it's whatever it was, but that's how I associated that growing up. And so that is not true now.
No.
So let's talk about that. What are the possibilities out there for someone with Down syndrome?
Oh my gosh, they are endless now. We have business owners who have Down syndrome now, right? So there's different places. There's a place here in Oklahoma City. It's a coffee shop that only employs kids with Down syndrome or individuals with Down syndrome. It's a great place. Business owners. We have advocates that go to the Capitol to advocate on inclusion and different healthcare needs for individuals with Down syndrome. We have athletes there was this one kid that went to the World Championships, Special Olympics, World Championship games in Australia a couple of years back for golf. So it's, the possibilities are endless. There's really
like you would have been his biggest fan for some
reason.
reason.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
So David, when we were in high school, was like the golf king, just so you know. He was a very good golfer.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
And so I feel like he would be like his biggest supporter.
Yes, big time. Yeah.
Yeah. There's just so many programs now. Even here in Texas, there's a great program with I feel like maybe the Texas Workforce Commission does a lot of maybe what the DASCO does for you guys in Oklahoma. It's ours is not. I don't think Texas Workforce is specific to just Down syndrome, but maybe to special needs in general. But they have like summer earn and learn programs where you go and work. People with special needs can sign up, and they will place you specifically in work environments that have said that they are willing to accept people who have special needs and will eventually want to place them to work there. So I think that's a really great program. So yeah. Okay. So inclusion, we talked a little bit about that, but what about like, he's 12 now and we know how middle school-ish, right?
Middle school, 6th grade. Yeah.
Okay. So I've been in middle school. You've been in middle school. Yeah. Middle school is rough.
It's rough.
It is brutal. And so how is middle school going and how are we doing with the social aspect of middle school? Because I think every middle school kid struggles, but is it more so for maybe Kasen?
So it can be. I felt like for the most part, he's done very well as far as doing well in school in the middle school deal. None of the kids really, right? Because we know how middle school kids can pick on other kids, right? As far as we know, he's not running into any of that. Yeah. I think the teachers and the staff are pretty good about keeping that at bay. So as far as we know, that hasn't been a problem. I will say outside of school, we've had issues with that, especially with neighborhood kids and stuff like that, secluding him and not letting him play.
Mm-hmm. How does that affect a parent when you see this happening, or when you're like feel powerless to change it because you don't really get to go out there and be like, hey kids, you need to
well, I kind of do though.
Good for you.
I'm that guy. I'm like the neighborhood Karen. No, it's disheartening. It's heartbreaking when you see these kids out there playing and trying to explain to Kasen that they won't let him play, and you can't really tell him why. That's what I mean. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't know, man. It's just because you're different, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one of the biggest struggles I have when it comes to that, just because I'm having a hard time explaining that to him, that who these kids are. And I've had conversations with the parents, I've had conversations with the kids, and it's done no good.
Mm-hmm.
And this comes from parents, right? Parents have to be good about trying to include kids with special needs when it comes to playing with their kids, but they don't introduce it. So
Yeah, well, definitely not an excuse for them, because I just think bad behavior should be called out. But
yeah, but I get it.
but there's always a but. No, the problem is like what I talked to you about, is that we don't like to have uncomfortable
No,
conversations. We don't
yeah,
like to be put in situations, and we dang sure sometimes don't want to put ourselves in someone else's shoes.
right, exactly.
Like, we're just like, hey, you wear your own shoes, I've got mine over here.
No,
And so I think that some of that is part of the problem. Would you agree?
it's a big problem, and I think a lot of parents and a lot of kids struggle with feeling comfortable asking parents with kids with Down syndrome questions, right? Which
Mhm.
you shouldn't feel that way, because honestly, the Down syndrome community is more than willing to answer, and especially me and his mom. If a kid has a question about anything, regardless of what it is, there's no stupid question when it comes to this. Go ahead and ask. Or if you're a parent and you just want to know, like, hey, can he do this? Can he do this? Can he not do that? Ask us. We're more than willing. We're open books when it comes to that. In fact,
Yeah.
we encourage people to ask us these questions. If you see an individual out with special needs and they're with their parents, talk to the parents about them. Find out more information about them.
Hmm.
And that's the
Yeah.
best way to do that, is to ask people, even
Yeah.
though
I,
it's
I think talking about things, right? It's just,
yeah,
we have to be vulnerable sometimes, and we don't want, I think that a lot of us, we're just like, oh my gosh, what should I say? What shouldn't I say? And,
yeah,
oh, am I going to, come across this way? Or what are they
yeah,
going to perceive what I say?
yeah.
And we get in our own heads a lot of times, and the other person doesn't, it doesn't bother them at all.
Not one bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I hate that, but I'm glad you're kind of like the neighborhood parent too. That
Oh
just
my
makes me
goodness.
happy.
Yeah.
I love that.
It's bad. Yeah.
So we talked about Down syndrome, and that one of your, treat them just like you would treat anyone else.
Yes.
Okay, so let's talk about that.
You cut out. I'm sorry. I didn't hear the first
Okay,
part of that.
just treating them like you treat anyone else.
Yeah,
Treating
that's the
anyone.
thing. Like, put the stigmas aside. Like, there's nothing a kid with Down syndrome can't do. They love to play with their friends. They love to play computer games. They love to play Xbox, PlayStation. They like going to the store and scanning stuff in the scanner like every other kid likes to do. They like to carry groceries inside for mom and dad. They just do everything. They help around the house. I mean, there's nothing that they can't do.
Yeah. Do you think that there is a stigma associated with that? A pretty disparaging stigma, though, that is like, they're never going to do anything, they're never
Yes.
going to understand things, they're never going to, like, these poor parents are never going to have a normal kid.
Good, yeah. It's a massive, massive stigma. In fact, I dealt with that for the first 2 weeks. And that was what I struggled with more than anything was, well, he's not going to be able to go through school. He's not going to be able to play sports. He's not going to be able to move out on his own. He's not going to be able to go to college.
Mhm.
All these things that are just so not true, because we've seen it. We've seen the older generation of kids with Down syndrome do and surpass all those milestones or ceilings that people put on them.
Right. Wow. So, kind of like hopes and dreams for the future. I know that, your thought is whatever his hopes and dreams are, I'm sure,
Yeah.
but inside of you somewhere, and you're a little ticker, there are some hopes and dreams for him. So what are some hopes and dreams that you have for him?
So for me, it's to go to college, right? So it's to go to college, is to have a job when he gets older, is to get married, right?
Mhm.
To have a loving relationship with somebody. That's just like any other kid and any other parent with kids, right? We want to see our kids do great things when they grow up.
Absolutely. So the worries are the same.
Worries are
Um,
the
Let me ask you this. Do you feel like any type of burden for the like, okay, but what happens if I'm gone, or what happens if
Yes.
mom's gone? And let's talk a little bit about that.
So that's something that we still struggle with day to day, right?
Okay.
Is what happens if we both pass away, right?
Yeah.
God willing, that never happens. But
Yeah.
what happens with Kasen? What does that look like? Does that look like older sibling taking care of him when he gets older? That's quite a burden on his older sibling, right? Is that
Mhm.
grandparents, if they're still around, that's quite a burden on grandparents. So is that family friends who take care of Kasen and do that? That's probably one of my biggest fears
Okay.
is passing on before, or one of us passing on before that.
Mhm. And so how do you like combat that like nagging in the back of your head? Because I'm sure it's there. I mean,
It's
I
there
work
every
with
day.
parents with
Yeah.
special needs, so I know it's there.
Yeah,
I know
it's
it's
every
there.
day. I don't know. I think you have to pray about it and trust God that He's got a good plan and things will work out the way that they're supposed to work out. I think that's about the only thing you can do.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. I love that answer though. Yeah. Let go and let God.
That's all you can do, right? Like, yeah, it's just out of my control.
Yeah.
You can do the things that you can do: stay healthy, exercise, eat right, and do stuff like that. But
Do you
accidents
think
happen.
that that fuels you in in your own wellness, like to take care of yourself? Because
Yeah,
we
probably.
are getting older. I don't like to admit it.
Yeah,
That like tasted horrible coming out of my mouth. But we are, and
I'm still super young. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm only 27, so
and our wellness all of a sudden, there were things that we could have been doing probably in our 20s that we
yeah,
weren't doing, and
yeah,
then it caught up to us in our 30s, and then we're having to like right the ship. Does that make sense sometimes?
yes,
And so,
yeah.
like, what are some of the things that you are faithful to for yourself, not only for your self-care, but also for like wellness, to try to be as healthy as you can be so you can be in the picture as long as you can?
So both me and his mother are very active. We literally are out doing something every single day. We usually eat right. We don't eat a lot of junk food. That's not something that we typically do.
Mhm.
We make our kids work out and get outside and do that. And also mental health. You have to really focus on mental health, especially when you're a parent with kids with special needs, right? Because every day is going to create a new burden or a new worry that you have to look at and look objectively at. And so
Yeah.
staying mentally healthy is one of the biggest things you got to do as a parent with somebody with Down syndrome.
Yeah, for sure. Well, there's just that stress cycle, that there's
Yeah.
like the three types of stress. You have that like acute stress, and you have your episodic stress, then you have that chronic stress. And I kind of feel like, and tell me if I'm wrong, please, because I would love you to tell me that I'm wrong. But that kind of chronic stress sometimes is where you're at with when you're constantly addressing someone else's needs in the way that you are, and when you're making sure that that nagging voice in the back
Yeah.
stays where it needs to. Would you say that that's a chronic stressor for you?
Oh, I believe so. Yeah. And we have all three on
Mhm.
a daily basis at times,
For
actually,
sure.
right? Because you're
Yeah.
worried about your kids' health quite a bit because these kids generally have health issues. And so you have to worry about that all the time. But yeah, chronic stress is something that you really have to combat as a parent with a kid with special needs. Yeah.
Yeah, very good. Yeah. I just think that that's such a important message, because I think there is that is missing in the messaging
Yeah.
of our parents with special needs. It's so focused on the kids, because you can become so tunnel vision on
Yeah.
that, and you lose sight of having to take care of everything else. We were talking about the stats for people with and their relationships, and just things that like isolation brings, and different things like that, of how people who have someone with special needs in their family, it can kind of get pretty tunnel vision. And you were talking to me about that. Would you share a little bit about how your family, you said the older sibling,
Yes.
kind of had to come to some terms with some things. Would you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I will talk about that. So, from day one, he's been nothing but great as far as Kasen goes. In fact, he's been an integral part in how great Kasen's done growing up, whether that be motor skills, talking, all that. Like, it's been getting to watch his older sibling and wanting to do everything that he does.
Yeah.
It's been great. But it's the fact that he was so able to understand and realize that the focus and attention was no longer on him. It was all about Kasen. And
Mhm.
that was like, it took a big person to be able to go through that as a
Yeah.
kid, right? Because being the only child at one point, getting all the attention, and now it completely stops. It completely halts. And
Mhm.
all attention goes to Kasen.
Yeah.
For his ability to do that was just phenomenal.
Yeah, for
He
sure.
was understanding, like helped with everything, right? So the older he got to where he could watch Kasen, so we could go to the gym or take care of ourselves mentally and physically, right?
Mhm.
He would do that. No,
Wow.
no arguing, no griping, nothing. It was a
Yeah.
great, great older sibling.
So are they like the best buds that
Best,
you could ever?
best of friends. Oh my gosh, yeah, their bond is phenomenal. It really
Mhm.
is. And
Wow.
that's most siblings that have a sibling, brother or sister with Down syndrome, it's usually a pretty tight bond between the two.
Wow. Okay. I was thinking about when you were saying that about older sibling just being able to kind of like understand that. And I think about just watching kids in classrooms. And
Mhm.
I always loved to go into inclusion classrooms in elementary school, especially lower elementary, because kids know that there might be something different or
Yeah,
something going on, but they don't talk about that and they just want to help. Like that they kind of take them on as their project. They want to be their friends. Like, and I wish that that stayed like as we continued to grow through the life
right.
cycle because something in there changes, right? Somewhere along the cycle, it changes a bit. And where did you see the change in that for Kasen? Whereas, everything was good and maybe even neighborhood kids and he could have those relationships and then something kind of changed.
So this year in particular, it did. It was a big change for Kason going from elementary to middle school. He, in fact, had four friends, four classmates that they were all five were inseparable, right? Great
Mhm.
friends, did everything together, but they went to a different middle school because of where we live and all that stuff.
Yeah.
That was one of the biggest transitions for Kason was starting a new middle school and then not having his general ed friends to hang out with.
Yeah.
So this year has for him been the biggest struggle and hurdle when it comes to that. So he hasn't been able to create those peer-to-peer relationships this year like he has in the past through elementary school.
Hmm.
That was the biggest. That's been the biggest for us this year.
Yeah. And does he um long for that? Do you feel like that is somewhere that
I
he's
think so. I think all kids, right? All kids
yeah.
need that relationship, those friendships, and that for me and his mother has been one of our biggest reasons for being upset and depressed this year with that is because he just doesn't have friends, right? Like so most normal kids, right? They're like, hey, we're gonna go stay the night at so and so's house. We're gonna go hang out at so and so. He doesn't get to do that, and that's
Mhm.
that's one of the most disheartening things as a parent, getting to watch your kid. So I mean, we're his friends, you know what I mean? Like that's
Yeah.
why we're so active because we want to do, but it's not the same. You
No.
got to have that peer to peer relationship.
Yeah, yeah. So you're watching the norms
Yeah,
move
yeah.
by, and he's not participating in some
Not
of
getting to
the
participate.
social
The
norms right now.
social norms. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And do you think that, I don't know, I'm sure you guys have been back in school for a while in
yeah.
Oklahoma as well,
Yes.
but how did, any of the, like, pandemic type things affect or not affect you guys?
It wasn't bad. We kind of had the same thing, right? The mask mandates and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It affected a little bit because everything went to online schooling for a while.
Mhm.
And so I think you lose out on a little bit of the education when you do online versus in person.
For sure.
Um, But outside of that, he did he took it like a champ. He did all of the stuff like he was supposed to. So
Wow, that's really good because
yeah,
I mean, I know that that has been a big
huge.
worry
Oh
and
my
even
goodness.
complaint for a lot of parents with kids
Yeah.
with special needs, as they just felt like they weren't getting the education that they should have.
Well, and what happens too, right? So if you've got a kid who's on an IEP, individualized education program, and who are getting these occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy, stuff like that, they're not really getting it now that we were going through that pandemic and stuff like that. So Kasen wasn't getting speech therapy like he should have been.
Mhm.
We can only work with him so much, but it takes a specialized teacher, specialized individual to work on that with your kid. And so he missed out on a little bit of that. But I feel for a lot of parents who had kids in special needs because they missed out on a lot of that stuff.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so let's talk about, we kind of hit the IEP plans. We're talking about just support groups in general. And you're talking about mental health. So just keeping your mental health and everything, what are some of the support groups that you utilize, or what are some things that you do to kind of maintain and keep going? And some of those, I'm sure you have a whole lot of good days, but every once in a while we all
Yeah,
have a pity party for ourselves, right?
always. Yeah.
Pity party of one.
Yeah, right. Yeah, for me, it's I'm able to. I've got a bunch of people I work with that are phenomenal, right? So we
That's
work with
great.
each other 10 hours a day, and so I get to kind of let my frustration out on them, and they've been great. And so that's
Mhm,
what I do. Or if I'm not at work, it's with friends and stuff like that, or going to the gym. That's a pretty big outlet for me, is going
mhm,
working out, running the trail, walking the trail, stuff like
mhm.
that.
Yeah,
Desiree kind of does the same. She's got a lot of close friends that she can bounce off ideas off of and stuff like that.
that's great. Well, I just want to ask you, is there anything that you feel like led to say or share for someone who may be seeing this, that maybe has a kid with Down syndrome, doesn't have the support that you do, or maybe in a place where they just received, a prenatal diagnosis, something, or just kind of some words of wisdom for everyone else who is in the world and maybe only encounters someone with Down syndrome, or a family that has someone with Down syndrome in it every once in a while? What are some things that you could share for us?
Yeah, it's going to be okay. Reach out and get online, do some research online. There's so many resources on the internet with individuals with Down syndrome. There's reach out within the community. See if you see somebody in the store who has a kid with Down syndrome, talk to them. If you just got a prenatal diagnosis, because I promise they're going to be okay and upfront talking to you about any and all problems. And then for just community in general, if you see people with Down syndrome, stop putting ceilings on them, because the sky's the limit. There's so much these kids can do. It's absolutely incredible.
Yeah, I think that's great. That's great information. And David, I just want to say thank you for coming on and visiting with us and telling us about your story and about your wonderful kid. I get to see him on Facebook all the time, and I
Yes.
love his videos, especially when he's dancing.
Oh
Those are
my
my
gosh.
favorite.
Yeah.
Those are my
Dance
favorite.
moves.
I'm gonna get some of those moves one day.
Right?
But anyways, thank you so much. I'm gonna go ahead and let you go backstage, and then we will wrap up. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you so much
All
for the
right.
invite. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Well, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the message as much as I did, and we will see you in a couple weeks. Thanks.